We are so pleased to be here. We have a marvelous panel today. I'll run through the panelists very quickly, and then I'll allow them a few minutes to just introduce themselves and their organizations. First of all, we have Rebeca Grynspan, who's from the United Nations Development Program. And then we have Odede, who's the founder of Shining Hope. Then we have Lynne Patterson, who's with Pro Mujer. And last but not least, Lina Srivastsava, who's from on the board of directors of Grassroots.
Global Grassroots.
Rebeca, you'd like to say a few words and just introduce yourself?
Okay. I'm Rebeca Grynspan. I'm the Undersecretary and Undersecretary General. I'm the Associate Administrator of the UN Development Program. And I've been in the UN around 10 years. And before that, I was in the government of Costa Rica. I was Vice President and Minister in my former life. And very engaged in these subjects through my life.
Kennedy?
Yes. I'm Kennedy Odede from Kenya, Kibera. I'm the co-founder of Shining Hope for Communities, which fights gender inequality and extreme poverty by linking free schools for girls and other social services in Kibera slums. Thank you.
I'm Lynne Patterson, co-founder of Pro Mujer, a women's development organization that operates in 5 countries in Latin America with 200,000 clients. I'm a teacher by training. I believe strongly in education. Everything we do is to educate women so that they can be change agents in their own community. And I'm thrilled to be here this evening.
Hi, I'm Lina Srivastsava. In my day job, I run a strategy firm that looks at how to use culture in social change. So I work with a lot of documentary filmmakers. But today I'm here in my capacity as a board member of Global Grassroots, which is an organization dedicated to working with vulnerable women in post-conflict zones. We run an incubator that allows women to create their own social ventures and civil society organizations.
Thank you. We're here today to look at the role of women in alleviating poverty and hunger. And I think one of the major questions in your mind is perhaps why is it that there's such an emphasis on women and girls in the way that we address poverty. And I'd like to pose this question first to Rebeca because she's with UNDP and they do a lot of work with women and children around the world. Why is it, what is it that distinguishes women and children, girls especially, from men and boys in terms of how poverty impacts upon them?
Well, the general evidence just show that because of the difficulties women have to negotiate and to have power within the family and in society, they usually are impacted in a major way and more than men in terms of hunger, disasters, and poverty. And the numbers show that very clearly. 7 out of 10 of the people that are hungry in the world are women and girls. And so the disproportion is shown by evidence in a very clear way. And this disempowerment and discrimination and a lack of equality shows at all levels. It shows in the family, in the community, at the local level. It shows in political empowerment, in economic empowerment. And, to fight, we know, and the evidence also show in an overwhelming way, that if we want to achieve the Development Millennium Goals, if we want to fight poverty and hunger, and if we want just a better society, it's overwhelmingly shown that to invest in women and girls is the best way to get there. Not only for them, but for the whole society. So it's not only a women's issue, it's a societal issue, and that's the main message, probably, from the work that we have been doing.
Yeah, so clearly women actually suffer from a lot of discrimination, lack of voice, a lack of empowerment. And I think Kennedy has seen that firsthand in Kibera. This is the largest slum in Africa. where he's actually set up Shining Hope to address poverty. What are some of the key ways in which you think that, or at least from your experience with Shining Hope, you can actually address poverty among women and girls?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to know places like Kibera slums and other places, there is a gender inequality, but at the same time, what we call lack of resources, you know. And even here, when there's lack of resources, even the small ones that you have to fight for. As a little boy in the slum of Kibera, I went to work in a factory to earn $1.5 per day for 10 hours. And we were suffering. We went without food. And I took one of my best friend, Mary, to go. Mary, there's a job in the factory. Let's go together. When we reached the factory, Mary was denied job. Was denied. So Mary has to go back. And I have to earn $1.5. So what happens is that people like Mary start selling their body, you know. So only they know that they have to get married, but they should be married by people working in the factories, you know. And it's about lack of the resources. So I felt like the most important thing, you see these women really, really hard in my community, selling things on the road. You know, yet men are mistreating them. And the women are the engine of development in any society, according to my experience, you know. So the only thing to do was to add value on women. How do you do that? Do you want the men to fight you? But to prove that, like example, what we do, like having these schools at the same time, as you have said, that we have to. It's not a one gender journey. It's a struggle for the all gender. You know, and they will always coexist together. You know, there's no way my mom is going to live alone. You see, so people want to work together. So having Kibera School for Girls, at the same time, offering other services like, you know, health center, water. So when the men come in that area, they see, oh, I'm going to Kibera School for Girls. And that changes kind of perspective, how they see women, you know. So you can do, the best idea is to know that how you can coexist them together, you know. It's not about women only there. That will not work, you know. We have to work entirely the community.
Thank you, Kennedy. I think that's a good entry point that you've given us, because you're talking about tools that women need, the access to resources. And, you know, Lynne, actually, she does a lot with microfinance in Latin America. And Pro Mujer is quite innovative in the ways it addresses the poverty that women and girls face in Latin America. Can you tell us some of these innovative ways that your organization has addressed this issue?
Yes, and I'd like to start with the origin of Pro Mujer, because all of our programs and services for women came out of my and Carmen Velasco, a Bolivian woman's work in Bolivia 20 years ago, when we started working with women who were receiving donated food. And because we were both teachers, we started with 4 groups of very poor women living in, I don't like poor women, but women who are living in impoverished circumstances, who had very little opportunity to go to school or to even be aware of their own potential and value. And so we started right away with a methodology. How could we get the women to think and reflect on their own experience and become owners of their own development? And so the educational programs that we developed are designed to change women's sense of themselves by having them reflect and think about their own experience. And so we believe that the key to women's development and women's becoming catalysts for change is a sense of their own power and their value, which comes, where does that come from? Pro Mujer offers, we form groups of 30 to 40 women. They are called community associations. They're really grassroots organizations. And this is very important to women coming into their own. They elect their own board of directors. They approve each other's loans. They run their meetings. They help solve each other's problems. They invite their friends and neighbors to join. So it's really a grassroots organization that serves women. And the microfinance came about after we went through health, family planning, child development, the programs that we knew, because the women said, we need income. We need to start businesses and earn money. And so we developed a course in business skill training, and they wrote business plans, and then they said, we need credit to put these plans into effect. I'm telling the history because I think it's so important. This organization grew in Latin America for Latin American women with their input and participation. So when we talk about what are the components that are needed, I think it's the women's active involvement, opportunities to grow, opportunities to be together, financial services, so working capital loans so they can start businesses, and then we've always provided health education and access to health services, recognizing that income alone isn't enough, that if your woman is sick or her children are sick, then she's very vulnerable and her livelihoods are in jeopardy. So those are the components of Promo Here, and that's where they started.
It's just not about giving them money, is it? It's about creating the conditions, the environment in which they can actually use those resources to improve themselves. That's a key. Just very quickly, just tell me, how fast did Mujer grow in Latin America? I'm so amazed by that.
Well, I'm amazed too. I'm amazed too. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary. And Promo Here is now in what we started in Bolivia with those initial 4 groups of women who were receiving donated food. Our integrated approach to women has been replicated in 5 countries, Bolivia, where we started, Nicaragua, Peru, Mexico, Argentina. Our operations, we have over 200,000 clients, a staff of 1,400, and strong desire to provide these services to more women who urgently need the kind of support that we provide. So that's where we are.
Okay. Now, Lina wears 2 hats, as she mentioned to you once. She's into media, strategic media, for one thing, and she also is on the board of Global Grassroots, which I got wrong the first time I introduced you. Yeah. But Global, do you want to talk a little bit first about Global Grassroots and just tell us, because they work with vulnerable women and in post-conflict countries, and the idea is to make women themselves agents of social change. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm going to just push back on something that you said earlier, and you were talking about people being voiceless, and I think, I and Global Grassroots come from the position that no one is voiceless. It's just that people aren't listening to them necessarily, so everybody has a voice. And also, this is not to discount the experience of men and boys in situations of post-conflict, post-conflict zones and zones of poverty. But there is a difference, in how women are treated and how they are able to navigate situations in post-conflict zones. So Global Grassroots works primarily with vulnerable women in post-conflict zones. We are in Rwanda right now, and we've been into Haiti, and we've also just Gretchen Wallace, who's the founder, just came back from the Gulf Coast. And so we're working with these kinds of populations, and our programs are now in demand actually in 40 countries, so we're trying to expand, and the next place we're going is northern Uganda. The way Global Grassroots works is through an incubator system, and it goes from what we're calling conscious social change, which starts from personal transformation. And that is anywhere from personal transformation techniques like breathing and yoga, to heal from trauma and make sure that you're taking care of yourself personally, because you can't work in your community and improve your community until you've actually healed yourself. So it goes from personal transformation into leadership training, into social venture development skills, and then into seed grants and high-level management consulting for the new civil society projects and organizations. And we work primarily with women in these zones because we feel that women are, on the one hand, the most invested in their communities because they're caring for their children, they're caring for their elderly, they're caring for an entire community, and they're also most at risk for not being listened to. They're the ones who are the most vulnerable. So that's why we've chosen to work with women as well.
Yeah. I think the message, the key messages coming out of this is that actually what's underlying the kind of efforts that all of us are making is to address women's empowerment, gender equality, women's rights, And Rebeca here is one of the top officials in the UN and in UNDP, who's entrusted with achieving the Millennium Development Goals. And one of the key goals, of course, is achieving women's equality and gender empowerment. Can you tell us what is it that the UN and UNDP in particular are doing to try to improve women's empowerment and gender equality and women's rights, particularly try to achieve the Millennium Development Goals?
Let me say first that when you listen to all the experience and all the good things that are being done and that we know that have impact and changed the life of women, really what we are worried about and what I think that is the next step is how do you scale up, all these marvelous initiatives to really be able to affect all women in the world that are suffering from all this. And this is really the challenge for the future. The challenge is how it's not only what somebody does in one place, but it's something that we can scale up in the local governments, in the national governments. How do we create the systems that will be able to sustain this effort for the future? And I think that what UNDP is trying to do is precisely that, is how do we help in all the efforts and all the evidence that is there and the things that work, that we know that work, what are the bottlenecks to make them happen at a scale that will really get to the millions of women that are, waiting for an answer. And that's really the part where we are working right now, how do we affect the laws in the countries that really prevent women from having access to justice, having access to productive assets, having access to be elected and elect. How do we really transform the systems that really prevent them from being full citizens and from getting the gender equity that they are entitled to. And that's one part. The other part is that we have, as has been said already by all of you, we have seen that a lot of the times to get to the political empowerment of women, you have to go to the economic empowerment. They have to have the resources, and I think that Kennedy, Lynne, and Lina also talked about that. They have to have the resources to have some degrees of freedom to be able to decide by themselves for a way to get out of poverty and to get out of situations of discrimination and violence, etc. How to get more resources to women's hand. And here again, what we have is not the lack of knowing what to do, because we know what to do with all the evidence also that is coming from the grassroots organizations, from the civil society and NGO communities. But the whole issue is how we make it happen at the scale that will really make sense for the women that are, women and children that are waiting there for the solution.
Yeah, I think that takes us nicely into the grassroots solutions that Kennedy has been pushing in Kibera, right? And what are the sort of innovative ideas that you have generated within your community to try to improve women's empowerment and gender equality? What sort of things have you done?
Okay, I think I have to say that United Nations Development Program in Kenya, working together with Habitat, they have really done cool stuff. They are really, and what I love about UNDP so much is that they have acknowledged the power of the people, the local people involvement, which is good. And they have been much more into local capacity building, and empowerment. Yeah, but, still things has to be done a little bit. So as a boy growing up in Kibera, we had no hope, just trying to come together. I had a certain, an idea on UN and the UNDP. I felt like I was called a informal mayor, in the ghetto. But the problem has been how to, which I'm sure they're working on, how to access these kind of people. I come from Kenya, UNEP. I am a very powerful local leader in my small community. I never even entered the United Nations office in Nairobi, But I think by this kind of talks gives networking and opening. And I felt that I tell my community that one day when I start working with the government officials, then I'll be able to access UN, which is not true because I think they're really there for people, and we have to acknowledge what they have been doing. And now there's a way they're trying to penetrate the community, which I think is something good. And I look forward to work with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And how has Mujer actually crafted its programs in order to make sure that you address this issue of women's empowerment?
Well, could I just respond to Rebeca for a minute? Because I think she makes a very good point about scale. And I think one of our ambitions, we have thousands of clients, but we really do need to deal with millions of clients. And when we're talking about scale, we're talking about social enterprise, and we're talking about sustainable institutions that can cover their costs. And the role that the UN and other development organizations can play, I think, are helping make the investment to get good programs off the ground. But if we're going to last and to be permanent, which we want to be, we don't want to provide services for a short time for people and then withdraw them, we're going to have to be replicable, scalable, sustainable, and have a very strong impact. And so I think if I were sitting in your seat, I would be looking for organizations that met those 4 criteria, and then I would do everything I could to promote them. I think that if I give a story of one of our clients, it would put it into perspective and might illustrate how we're working with women in maybe a more concrete way. I'd like to just talk we hear a lot about anecdotes, and I wish, I'm sitting with filmmakers, and I wish I had a film that I could show Adelma Altamira, because that would be much more, for her, she can speak for herself better than I can speak for her. And I actually heard her speak in Seattle at a luncheon with 900 people. Adelma Altamira is now 38 years old. She's a client of ours in Nicaragua. She has 2 children. Her daughter is 20, and her boy now is 16. When she came to us in 2003, she was invited to join a communal association in Nicaragua. She had, like many, many women that we work with, become pregnant in her teens, had married, because that was the expectation that would be her life. Her husband was abusive and beat her and eventually abandoned her and her 2 children. In 2003, she was invited to join a group in her neighborhood and took out a $100 loan. With this $100, she was able to start a business. This is the working capital loan that gets paid back very regularly. Anyway, she took out $100, and her business that she decided was to buy clothes in Managua, in the market, and sell them in Honduras. Central America countries are very close together. This she does 3 times a week: buy clothes and sell clothes, buy clothes and sell clothes. It's not, not an easy life. She has, since 2003, been able to build this business so that now her last loan was $1,000. In the interim between 2003 and now, she has kept her son, he's graduating from high school, and her daughter is in the 3rd year of college studying pharmacy. In addition, that's not the only story. That's fairly typical of our clients. Their businesses, with their businesses, they can improve their houses and send children to school. But in 2006, because we offer health services and screenings to our clients, a screening revealed that she had cervical cancer. And Mujer arranged for her to have a biopsy and the treatment that was required. And she's currently in remission. I think that illustrates the multi-dimensionality of our program and what happens to clients who join these groups. She's one last thing I think bears repeating. She's the president of her group, and she's a true leader. When I was in Seattle, I went to Seattle to a luncheon with one of our partners, and 900 people, and I'm in the audience, and I had not met Adelma Altamira, and she took the stage, and the woman who introduced her said she was so struck because Adelma had so many things to say about the organization of Promo Hair that she could not have achieved what she had without the support of this organization. And her talk to the audience, it was translated, I think really reflects the leadership and the confidence that happen when a woman is given resources and opportunities to develop herself. And so I hope this is.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing story, and it's so touching. And I think a lot of people actually appreciate the kind of transformational change that you see in women when they're given access, they're given the opportunities which are denied them, you know, without you know, some kind of assistance and support.
Well, Donald, I think that is, you're just making a key point, because for me, it's the women are a latent resource, not just in Latin America, but in the world. And so one has to ask oneself, why are women so vulnerable? Why are they in the position that they're in? And it's you know, historic, it's cultural, but as you put it so well, that if, well, everyone's putting it so well, but because women want a better life for their children, they'll just knock themselves out to provide. They are the most conscientious, hardworking group on the planet. And given just a little bit of support, they will take it and run with it. So I don't think we can make a better investment than women.
Well, that brings us to a question I want to ask Lina, because
Sure.
there's a lot of ignorance out there, isn't there? And you work strategically with media to try to bring about social change, to bring about social transformation. Tell us about some of these things you've done, and what are the things that we can do to make sure that, you know, we get the message out that you know, social transformation is possible, and it's possible by working in very small ways. It doesn't require a lot of resources, but it requires a lot of understanding and care. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, and I mean, it's great for this audience. I don't know how many filmmakers are out there, but this is what film and media can do really well. I mean, Rebeca, you talk about scale and resources. We need economic resources. We need all of that. But what we really need is access to information and the ability to tell our own stories. Because women are, one of the things that I guess empowers women, I guess empowerment is also not a word I love, but because when we're talking about empowering women, we're sort of presupposing that they don't have power, but they do. It's just latent. And how do you actually start using narrative? How do you use media to start uncovering those individual stories? Like your story, Delma, is that her name, is extremely powerful. The ability to tell that story on a world stage, through a transmedia platform, through a documentary, through you know, an annual report, whatever it is really powerful. And when you start seeing women as human beings with stories to tell and ideas to contribute with voices, that becomes really powerful. So when I came on board with Global Grassroots, one of the first things that I did with the organization as a board member was to try to look at how we were doing our communications. And we did an entire overhaul of the website, and it's media rich. I'd encourage all of you to take a look at the Global Grassroots website, which is just globalgrassroots.org. And it's just media and video rich, and it's all stories of the women and their struggles and their sort of, you know, how they've managed to solve these problems by creating their own civil society projects. It's a media platform, is what it is. And women are also, they're consensus builders. The way we make decisions is sort of shared decision making. And how do you leverage that? How do you show stories about that and make that sexier in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you know, the stories that we tell and the stories that we hear are all about, you know, triumph over adversity through conflict, like war and sports. And I mean, sports is great, so I don't mean to sort of denigrate that, but they're very violent stories in a lot of ways, and we don't sort of celebrate the stories. Even in Hollywood, we you know, tell stories of women in these romantic comedies that are just not great, but we don't really have that many female heroes. And we need to have female heroes in the aid and development and human rights space as well. Like, how do you champion these stories? How do you make them more attractive and interesting? So that's a challenge, and that's a challenge to filmmakers, I think.
Yeah, and you're rather modest because you didn't mention that you actually produced this really marvelous movies about women in brothels. Can you just tell us a little bit?
Oh, I didn't produce it. I was the executive director of a nonprofit called Kids with Cameras, and Kids with Cameras was created at the same time as a movie called Born to Brothels. Born to Brothels is about the organization and sort of vice versa. Born to Brothels, it won the Academy Award in 2005, I think. And it was about the children of prostitutes in a Calcutta red light district and the power of art and photography teaching them and what that sort of, how that opened up their lives. The organization helped those children, and now the organization has merged with an Indian nonprofit, and there's plans for a home and school for children of the red light district. So there's this sort of entire arc. But it was the power of film that sort of created that entire effort. And it's really beautiful, and it was really effective as well.
I think you can see the range of activities that are going on in terms of women and girls, and trying to get them out of poverty and empowering them and so on, or tapping the latent power, as you would put it. But that's a danger that we're going to work in silos, right? The UN will run off and do its stuff. We're all well-meaning, and then each organization, Kennedy works with his group in Kibera, and you work in Latin America, and how should we work together? The UNDP is going to works well with the private sector and civil society. Tell us something about that.
It's so important what you are saying, because I was thinking precisely, hearing everybody, that the truth is that we need all of this happening at the same time everywhere. We need the grassroots organizations, and the people getting involved in their own transformation, because we cannot do it without the people themselves. And that was precisely the mistake that we did before, when we were learning about development, that we talked about them, but not allowing them to really make the change. And I think that your story and the stories that we have heard put it very well. So we need the people to make the change. We need the civil society that is able to do things that the government is not able to do, or even the international organizations. And we need that group to help. And we need the awareness and the social media and the changing of society as a whole, because it's not only women we need to influence. We need to influence men, And in the feminist movement, we have learned that because we always talk between ourselves. We need to make this conversation be wider in terms of the societal participation. And we need the changes in government. I come from a country that passed a law for the equality of women in the second half of the 80s. And I was part of the first, probably, a really organized group of women that came to government with that law and with that commitment, a political commitment. And I have seen 20 years, 25 years after that, a woman being elected for president for the first time in our national history. So in 25 years, I've seen a huge change in my society because we did the systematic changes that allowed a lot of women also to come in, even when we are not there anymore. So that's what has to come together. And that's why what you are saying is so important, because we cannot think that any one of us alone will make the change we need. We will need to partner. We will need to network. And fortunately, we live in a society that allows us to do that much more efficiently and much more intensively than we did before. And we have to learn much more to be able to talk between us and network between us in the comparative advantage and strength that each of us have because of our specificity, the specificity we bring to that. Grassroots organizations have a wonderful role to play. They don't have to substitute governments. Governments have to take responsibility also, you see? And that's what we have to bring together. And the truth is that probably gender equality, in my view, is the most transformational element of society that you can think of. It touches us in our most profound beliefs or prejudice or experiences, or it's exactly about us, about our status and role in society. So to bring this about, and I really believe that the 21st century will be a better century if we do this, we will have to bring all the wonderful energy and strength and experience that is here together with the multilateral organizations and the governments themselves, because they cannot get off the hook. You know, you have to really ask them to do what they are supposed to do, that is to bring more welfare, more freedom, and more justice to their societies.
I think everyone here can see the passion you bring to your job. and this is what the UN does to you, unfortunately. You know, you come in with different expectations, and the job takes over, and you become passionate about it. Kennedy, you've worked so much on your own, right? You've started, you relate that story where you got your first 20 cents and you bought this football, and you started shining hope from there. And you've done it all alone. What sort of support and what sort of partnerships would you like to see so that your idea and your aspirations for Shining Hope can actually grow and expand beyond what it is like right now?
Yeah, I think everything in my life has come through experience. I grew up in a society in an environment whereby there is no really bathrooms. There's no running water. It's normal to stay 2 days without food, and that's life, But I was really inspired by one woman called Jana Cheng, who is my mother, She used to go around to look for food. I had a dad too. He's a very good man, yeah? But my mom really worked extra hard, And I was able to listen to her when the neighbors, you see little girls of the age of 6 trading their body for food, and you wonder, But my mom really encouraged me, and she told me, Kennedy, I want you, I see something in you, and I want you to be what I should have been. I was denied education. I could be a very smart woman, but I was denied. But I want you to have that, I was denied, plus yours. And the only thing which I see is that through education, and see how much women in the community, you see how they suffer. The only through education that something can happen. She told me if she was a very powerful woman, she is still alive. She was like, what makes a difference? When the women are educated, they have high chances of being able to speak for themselves and to be on the platform. When they are not educated, they will remain in the slums. That will be their life. You get? So I was kind of really attached. And I took that. And that's why when I started my soccer team with $25, I worked with young girls. And I was able, now I'm able to start a Kibera school for girls because of that idea that when these little girls in Kibera, few of them will be ministers, they'll be playing a high-level thing in the world, And she told me that, Kennedy, without this education, I tell you, people will speak for us. We will speak there, And then that's today, really, I'm asking the film people and the documentaries that you have the power to enable women like my mom to speak, And that's the only thing, So and I believe like working with people like Rebeca, meeting people like Rebeca, we can make a change, And it's not about grassroots. It's also about another community. It's about state, If working in Bolivia, Kennedy Odede in Kibera Slum, we are all doing the same thing, and we are all making a movement of change. Yeah. So I really got inspired by experience and by mom, and I took that. With Kennedy, you take my words, you will go far. And I didn't know that I'll be able to sit in this kind of a place with people like Rebeca, So, and imagine this, what is interesting is a woman who is making people like Kennedy to be here today. Can you see that? That's why I say they are the engine of change. So when even one woman has a big impact, I'm a boy, I want to say no, but I've met President Bill Clinton, and if you trace it very well, I've been a panel with Sean Penn. I didn't know that. Growing a poor boy in the ghetto, in the slum. But I was inspired by my mom. You see? So I think it's really powerful.
You said it all.
Yeah, I think we all have mothers, don't we? So I don't see how, people can discriminate against women and girls when you have mothers, you have sisters, and you have daughters. It's just incredible. And maybe I'll just skip that Lynne for a second and just go to Lina, and ask her just, how do you get this message across, and how do we work together to overcome some of these barriers?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to use the word silo, and I want to make sure that we point out that when we're talking about women, there's a real push, at least with the MDGs, and sort of this year, there's a lot of talk about the power of women and investing in women. We have to make sure that we talk about the power of investment in women as opposed to relegating women to the side. And I think women and media makers have a really big role in doing that, in talking about the power of investment as opposed to creating silos for quote-unquote women's rights or women's work. And you get that story across, again, it's through, by showing stories of local agency, of telling stories about humanity. Kennedy's story about, he's met Bill Clinton, he's met Sean Penn, but you know what? It comes down to his mother. And you're right, we all have mothers, right? We all have mothers. And women have to recognize that too. Women aren't always as supportive of each other as they should be in a lot of contexts. And so how do we tell each other's stories in a really beautiful way? If you're I think there's a real opportunity here to make these stories, I used the word sexier earlier, which is probably not a PC kind of term, but how do you make them compelling? How do you start creating these stories and creating distribution streams and creating all kinds of different entry points into these stories to make sure that people are heard, that they're heard in a context that isn't either disrespectful or boring, in a lot of ways, and make sure that these stories of aid and development, human rights, community revitalization are well told. That's our opportunity and our responsibility as people who are involved in the UN, governments, grassroots organizations, and media. And we just have to make these stories more compelling and create the stream between individual stories all the way up to systemic change.
I skipped you for a reason, Lynne, because when we were in the green room, one of the things that Lynne brought up was, she said, I need to make a movie. and there's your partnership with Lina.
Yes,
but,
there we go.
But beyond just getting that message out and partnering, what are the other things that you see are important that we from the UN side, Rebeca and myself, can learn from you, to work better with you, and to work with other organizations? Just tell us, what are you thinking about right now in terms of this partnership?
I was so impressed with what Lina has said, because she's so right. I would love to make a film. I think what the UN is doing in this forum, which is highlighting, making visible effective programs and strategies, and bringing them to more public attention, I think that's very, very important. I know that we're going to have to work across not just sectors, health, microfinance, business development, housing, across sectors together. We're going to have to work across the private-public realms as well. And you mentioned, Rebeca, that you're working with the private sector as well, and so are we. When we're talking about scale, and also an expertise. We have today an incipient movement of corporate social responsibility, a recognition of the importance of giving back to communities where these companies produce or sell their goods. And there's a concept such as shared value, and I think shared value is what brings us all together. We can't have one good at the expense of another. We need to keep in mind that it is the public good that we all are vested in. And so I think, and then in terms of we at Promo Here, we were working with a number of very large corporations for investing in the organization, expanding our operations. And in the public realm, I think the UN, it falls into that category, and you have done wonderful things in the area of microfinance. You highlighted microfinance 1 year. You had the year of microfinance, and Princess Maxima is a wonderful spokesperson for microfinance. She's extremely informed and a wonderful communicator. I think so. I think that the the global strategy has to be that we really work to overcome the silos and the the conventional thinking that really hasn't done the job so far.
I think we'll have a few minutes for interaction with the audience. But before I open up the floor, does anybody else want to say something else? Rebeca, I think you have lots of things to say, but we just don't have enough time.
No. The only thing that I would say is that the story of Kennedy that is so inspiring and so wonderful has two elements that I think that is so important when we talk about social media. And we were talking about that in the green room. That is not only to put the problem, but also the possibility of the solutions. Because, one of the main problems we have is that when we only talk about the people as victims and not as agents of change, yes, and that change is really possible, when we do that, so we have, we raise awareness, but we don't make it mobilize towards the solution, And we need to sustain this effort for many years to come, This is not something that will come so quickly, And so it's so important that the social media helps us to bring these things that function, like the Mujer, or like what Linda is saying, or what Kennedy is telling. Also in the solution part of it, on the things that work and make it happen. Because this is the only way to sustain, the motivation and the effort on the scale we need.
Could I just add, one thought that I have is that we're working very hard in the social sector, but I think we're all citizens, and we see a world that is more and more divided. We see a world where the resources are where the gap between the rich and the poor is being more accelerated and wider all the time. And I think that's very, very troubling. And we are trying to do our work with very limited resources. And we see budgets. I'm sure the UN is always facing challenges in terms of funding. And so as citizens, I think that's the larger context within which we work, and we can't ignore what's going on in our own countries and in the world. I think, certainly working with women is a very good strategy, but working with poor women. But I think, that there's also a lot of work to do with as citizens, where we need governments that are looking out for the public welfare.
And part of the problem, I don't know if you feel this, but part of the problem I'm seeing, I don't know what you say, Donald, but is that a lot goes for the quick wins, not for the long-term solutions, And that's really a problem, because the people need, persistence and support and systems that will go beyond tomorrow. Because, if we want this really to be something that will achieve the Millennium Development Goals, etc., or what Kennedy is trying to do in his community, it's not a one-day job. Yeah. It's a job that has to stay there in a persistent way and with continuity for a long time. And more, people don't believe that it's possible. So they will go for the quick win solutions that will give a lot of relief, and is very important for one people at one moment, but won't make it happen in a systematic way for the future.
And also part of the problem is that sort of in that short-term kind of solutions building is this very unidirectional sort of we're going to help you kind of attitude, and something that we were talking about in the green room. I wish you guys had a bit of the green room. It was a great conversation. But we
almost didn't come here.
Yeah, we didn't pay for that. But one of the problems is that I think in the aid and development context, there is a lot of sort of we talk about top-down, we talk about unidirectional interventions, and there isn't a sense of necessarily a partnership. On the one hand, you have a problem with, as you talked about, sort of the positive imagery or the solutions, and just in terms of dignity. So again, as media makers or filmmakers, we need to really be careful about how we create our images and how we use those images and how we create stories, and make sure that we're always looking at it in terms of humanity and common shared humanity, not as an, oh, I'm filming a victim. And also, how do you create streams for real partnership, even if someone's coming to the table as a client or as a partner without economic resources, they're bringing their stories, and those are assets. And those have to be created as, you know, sort of, that's part of your package, and they're bringing that asset. And one of the things I'm really proud that Global Grassroots is doing is we're actually having, in Rwanda, we're having our programs evaluated by the clients and a Rwandan board of advisors. So it's not a third-party evaluator. It's actually the community who's evaluating the work that we're doing. So you're really creating these partnership streams. So.
Okay, I think on that note, I'll open the discussion to the floor. Are there any questions that you want to put to any of the panel members? The lady in front.
I'm actually on the junior committee at Mujer, but I'm also interning at, on a documentary project that's focused on the power of educating women and girls. So I definitely hear what you're saying about the power of media to broadcast this message, and also the importance of government in transforming societies and enabling organizations to work for women and girls. I'm wondering if you guys have any suggestions or strategies that you'd like to share about how to use film and how to communicate through film with governments.
Who wants to take the floor?
Is that mine?
Okay, Lina, go ahead.
I think so. With governments, that's interesting. So last year I worked with UNESCO for a while. We were trying to figure out how we create co-creation teams for arts and creativity in the realm of HIV and AIDS, and we were working with organizations that were working with the government. I think, you know, in terms of strategies, it's a little hard because it depends on the government. It depends on whether it's local, federal, whatever it's American, or if it's a sort of a developing world government. Because there's going to be there's going to be resistance, right, to having certain aspects of the story told. At the same time, there's a real hunger for people. I mean, people in governments are people too, right? So there's a real hunger to have stories told and to have the right stories told. You have to go in and really figure out with the individual, if it's in Africa or Latin America, with the individual minister or ministry, what latitude you have in terms of telling a story. I know, for example, somebody I know has been working in Chicago, and the outgoing sort of mayor's administration wasn't particularly open to the use of film and sort of having stories told. Rahm Emanuel is fairly, at least he said he's pretty open, so the way they're going to be telling that story is very different now that his administration is in. So it's really pretty dependent on who's in power at what time.
Anybody else?
I would put governments in the films. In a way, why not? You know, in the bad and in the good. Because in a way, you know, sometimes we do a film to tell the story that we are doing, but if we go a little bit beyond that, you know, to see who is doing also that or not doing it, maybe we can ask governments why they are not doing it. You know, that will be an important part of the message too.
We have time for another question. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. I'm with the NGO Committee on the Status of Women at the United Nations, and I'm the founding chair of their subcommittee on women and climate change. So my question is going to be about climate change. I noticed it was not referred to in any of your comments, though it's noted women are on the front line when it comes to. So I just wondered if you would like to comment on the extent to which climate change impacts upon your attempts to empower women and what you're doing about it. And the next topic I'd just like to mention has to do with stories. We've talked a lot about good stories, and this is just for your information. You may already know about it. Oxfam has on the website 4 stories of sisters on the planet, and there are 4 fantastic stories told from different perspectives. But my question I'd like to hear your views on climate change and how this impacts on women's empowerment. Thank you.
Want to go ahead?
I think that I will have to take a little bit of this one. You are absolutely right. Well, the evidence that have been shown lately is that women will be also disproportionately affected by climate change. Unfortunately, the numbers are horrific, really, with the disasters, in the natural disasters, how much women die because of many things. At the beginning, it was thought that only because of they were weaker, they couldn't get out fast enough, but it's also because of the cultural norms, because in many of the places, they don't have the freedom of movement they will need to really to adapt very quickly to the, for example, to the situation. So really the status of women is affecting women disproportionately in terms of disasters and climate change impact. That's one. But the second one is that women are really a very important part of the management of natural resources. So if we want to go about climate change and we want to go about sustainability and environment, we will have to take women very seriously as important actors in that agenda. And that's the second message. Even talking only about the rural areas, women produce 50% of the food of the world. They receive only 1% of the credit, but they produce 50% of the food. And if we would want to change, to adapt to what climate change is doing in terms of agriculture impact for food and hunger in the world, women will be a very important part of the group that we will have to go to for the change and for that agenda. So, there are managers of natural resources. They are disproportionately affected by climate change and disasters, and there will be central actors for adaptation and mitigation for the future. So, those.
Yeah, let me add something. In preparing for this panel, I went through the Global Grassroots annual report, and I noticed that we've had 300 since 2005 projects in Rwanda. And last year, I think more than half of them that were started or are about to be started are about water access. Climate change and water is a huge issue. And it's not just sort of access to water, it's access to clean water, it's security issues around that. Sort of one of the projects that Global Grassroots has funded and sort of spun out of the incubator is a woman named Seraphine, who's a 39-year-old mother of 8, who realized that in her community, it's right outside of Kigali, women would carry 2 jerry cans to fill water, which was dirty and would sort of make their family sick. It would take 1 to 2 hours every day to go get that water, and then they couldn't send their children to school and such. So she started a clean water organization that now services, 3 years later, about 1,000 people. I think it's 100 different families. But this kind of thing is going to happen more and more and more. It's not just in Africa, it's Latin America, it's everywhere. I mean, it's India, it's everywhere. And water is a huge, huge problem. So,
can I make
sure.
a marketing? UNDP produced in 2008 the Human Development Report on climate change, and water was a very important chapter of that. I think that is worth reading if people here is interested. It's very easy to get to that. And it's a wonderful piece, I think, still in the gender issue.
Oops, your scarf.
Yeah, it's my scarf, my hands, my everything. Okay. But in that Human Development Report, women, gender equality is an important part.
Yeah, that's a great report, actually.
Before we go to the next, they have 2 other persons, we have to hurry. Just a bit of propaganda on this climate change business. In 1992, we had the Earth Summit. And next year, we're going to have the 20th anniversary of that meeting. We're going to have a big meeting in Brazil. But one of the things that's missing from that agenda is the social aspect. And, we haven't been talking a lot about that. We've been talking about the green economy and so on, but it's about poverty and the role of women. where is that in that discussion? So I think it's people like you who are out there who can make an impact through the media, through your film, to actually bring attention to those issues. I think I saw you waiting, or you, was it you? Okay, it just was very quick, a short, quick question, and we get short responses, quick responses from the panel.
Okay, I guess my name is Sun, and I'm a filmmaker. I was wondering, it was mentioned earlier that 70% of the world's living under poverty line is women and children, and I was wondering, I was curious to know if any of you knew what percentage of that was sex workers.
Okay, maybe we just take the other question and then we'll finish off. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lily Virginia. I'm involved in music for documentaries, and thank you for being here. It's been really informative and great. But that aside, I am curious when we talk about transforming the lives of women, we go into these different cultures, and I'm curious about knowing if there are types of resistance from men, how you involve the male population. For me, oh, this is obvious, this makes sense. Of course, women should be empowered or use their latent possibilities, but what sorts of resistance, what sorts of strategies do you employ when you go into different communities and try and get everyone involved?
All right, so we have the two questions and open to the panel.
Well, when we go, we're clearly promoting good families and happy families, so we don't want to divide families. For all the reasons you know, we're focusing on women. And I want to say up front, change is hard. Change is not easy. And change is negotiated. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't change, right? There certainly is resistance. But the woman, again, is the change agent. This is in her hands. It's not in our hands. So what we try to do is give her the resources that she needs to be a more equal partner. Without income, she's totally vulnerable. She's very dependent, right? She has children, they need to eat, and she needs shelter. If without a sense of herself, she's not going to claim, or she's not even going to know her rights in the majority of cases. And if she's sick, or her children are sick, she's also even more vulnerable. And if her husband is sick, she's, the family is in danger. So by giving the woman the resources she needs to be a better negotiator and partner, we feel that we really are strengthening the family. And probably in the majority of cases, men see their wives in a different light. They begin to respect them more because they're demanding respect. So where's change going to start? One partner has to make a change. I'm not saying it is always easy, and in some cases, the family dissolves. They can't tolerate the change. But I think as an overall strategy, it is very strengthening of families because the partnership is stronger. The children see a better relationship between their mom and their dad. They see their mother is not being abused. And this is enormous impact. And Kennedy is here to say, the boys are greatly benefited. So we don't have a strategy for going out and dealing with men. That's in the women's hands, and we try to give them the tools they need to be their own advocates. Well, just one other thing. I do know of instances where the group has actually, their group, the communal association, has gone with the woman to support her in her home and talked to the husband. And in some cases, I know that the public attention and the pressure has changed. Also, has contributed to a healthier relationship and a healthier home.
Rebecca?
Let me take very quickly. With sex workers that you were, UNDP works with sex workers in the HIV/AIDS agenda because in the Division of Labor within the UN, we have to deal with the whole human rights stigma part of the agenda for HIV/AIDS. And it's extremely very hard work with the groups that are precisely marginalized from all the health systems or normal systems of society. So we can share some of the experiences that we have on that realm. With respect to the problem, not problem, what happened with men when we do programs to women. Let me give one example. In Latin America, you know that we have the conditional cash transfers programs that already 100 million people in Latin America is under those social protection programs, where most of them give the money, the monetary transfer to women. And at the beginning, what was noticed is that because we thought about women and not about a gender perspective, you know, part of the conflicts in the family were raising. Not violence, but conflict. And so the programs afterwards came with a component for conflict resolution within the family and the community. And those part of the program were put into place later on because the evidence was showing that it was very important to give money to women, that they invested much better the money than men, I'm sorry to say. Evidence showed that. They do much more education and health. And it was the right way to go, but conflict within the family because it changed the power relationship inside the family. And we want that to happen. Yes, we want that to happen. But we didn't give any tools for men and women to talk and resolve the conflict in the right way. And if that element was not into the program, so what we will have next is more violence also, you know, and maybe not helping to the family component of the program. So those are things that we have learned in terms of the social programs, you know, to include a much more a gender perspective and not only a women perspective within the programs that we do in the social part. So I just wanted to bring that as an example of it's a very good question, because if we don't consider men as part of the equation, you know, sometimes we make important mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, it's about
very quickly.
Yeah, it's about gender equality. It's not about sort of hating on men, right? So it's about leveling the playing field. And with Global Grassroots, the programs don't exclude men. It's just that they're mostly women-led, right? So it's empowering women, but men are brought into into the programs. Some of them work. There are men who actually work in the programs, and a lot of the programs actually are about creating dialogue between men and women, and making sure that, again, access to information is equal, access to resources is equal on the family level and the community level. And it's not always just about families. You have, you know, societal gender problems as well, and that you would tack those differently than you do with a family. But, you know, that's getting beyond the question, I think.
Yeah, on that note, I think we should call a close to the meeting. But I just want to pick up the point about women-led programs. The UNDP is now actually led by a woman for the first time in its history, which is remarkable. I think we're going to see fantastic changes. It's left to me to thank our panelists for coming here today. They've taken, you know, time out from their busy schedules. And to thank you for coming here today and for the questions that you've raised. We've had a really interesting discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.